Yeah. Siege. Riley. Taz. Yeah. Set me free and give me death. There ain't no other choices. When I lay down to go to sleep, I keep on.
Most of us know what we need to do, but we struggle to find the time. Tomorrow we will get to bed earlier. Tomorrow we will work out. Tomorrow we will spend more time with our kids, eat healthier, stress less, meditate more. Why are we waiting for tomorrow? It's time to bet on yourself.
Yeah, here we come. Here we come.
You know, so this idea of hitting rock bottom is so much deeper than almost losing your life. So what are you going to do when you have a dark night of the soul? We do not get to go through this life without losing people we love. The steps, and not just step one, all of them are a pathway through our pain. The pain could be a small thing nagging you at work. It could be miscarriaging and grieving that. It could be dating after divorce. It could be your dog dying. It doesn't matter what it is.
Willpower alone cannot clear a broken heart or a distressed mind. And I know we're speaking about this now. Life and business often demand a certain strength beyond what we think we're capable of. When it comes to building $1 million brand, Samantha, what circuits do you think a brand or a personal brand or a company needs to break in order to get to that next level?
If you are trying to be $1 million brand, then by whatever means necessary, whether it is my 12-step template or somebody else's, become a spiritual billionaire first.
We'll be saying, here we come. Yeah, here we come. Hey, here we come. Here we come. Here we come. Yeah, here we come. Hey, here we come. Hey, here we come. Here we come.
Hi guys, welcome to a wonderful episode of the $1 Million Branders podcast. Today we've got a very special guest. I'm so honored to have Dr. Samantha Harte on the show. Welcome, Samantha.
Hi, thank you.
I had the privilege of meeting her actually in person while I was in Los Angeles at the beautiful Growth Talks, which was just such amazing synergy. I mean, this woman walks into a room and you talk about a strong soul, and I'm very spiritual and I just felt her energy straight up. I mean, Samantha, you have done so much in your life. You have broken so many circuits. I've got your book right here. I melted actually on the plane when I got the note inside. And your writing is so beautiful, and that is why I wanted you as a guest on the show. But you said, "Dear Justine, may this book give you hope in the heartbreak and joy in the sorrow." Samantha Harte. And I love that because I just feel like you're such a real person, which is so rare in today's times. You've been there, done that. But for those of you who don't know Samantha, please go and follow her on social media. She's doing incredible things in the world. Obviously, her book just came out, which you've got to buy. And Samantha, I'd love for you to tell a little bit about your story, but I know that you are known as a cycle breaker, and that's one of the things you live and stand by. And your book is basically about breaking the circuit, how to rewire your mind for hope, resilience, and joy in the face of trauma. And I know you've been there, done that, but please give us a little bit of background about you, because I've read the book, but I don't want to spoil it for our listeners. I just think that it's incredible, and your journey, you've walked the walk and you talk the talk. So tell us, please.
Thank you for that intro.
Of course.
I love hearing it back because it just lands differently every time. And at the same time, it's incredibly validating. And because of all the work I've done, I no longer need somebody else's validation about the way I'm living my life to feel good. However, it's nice to hear it because everybody is in the health and wellness space, it seems like these days.
Yeah.
And you can get certified to be just about anything in a very quick period of time. So how am I unique? And yet I truly believe that I am. And I really believe each one of us has a story to tell. Each one of us has a book to write. And mine's now out. So I get to talk to you guys from the other side of my trauma. Not that it doesn't show up, because it does. And not that I am healed, ED, I am healing. And that will always be the case. But it's really cool to be sitting where I am today talking to you. Thank you. How do you tell 4 decades of a story in 5 minutes or less? Let's see. If I were to give the listener a snapshot of my youth, it was, only in hindsight, by the way, wildly dysfunctional and boundaryless. So I was seeing things, hearing things, trying things that a young girl just shouldn't. Specifically, I had a big sister who had a very rough time in puberty and was immediately experimenting with drugs and alcohol, sex with men and women. And so none of those things seemed weird to me. By the time I was in early adolescence, my father was resigned to the basement because he had done enough damage to my mother, where she said, "Oh, well, we can't break up because of you and Jess. So instead, we'll just fight and be completely emotionally enmeshed with one another. And he'll be in the basement. And I will tell you, girls, every horrible thing he's ever done." So my father's presence was physically there, if you will, on a different floor, but emotionally, he was completely absent. And my mother was a person who, by the time I came online into adolescence, was filled with self-righteous indignation. This person crossed me, so fuck them into perpetuity, especially my dad. So my mother was having an extramarital affair. She was also abusing prescription pills. My sister was sneaking out using drugs, and I was just the young one trying to keep the peace. My mom was also really depressed a lot of the time. I'm not sure if that's what she was self-medicating. I would take a wild guess and say probably. She
Yeah.
totally didn't in therapy because she was too smart. So I was always taking the emotional temperature in the house. I was always trying to be the mediator and keep the peace and make everything okay. So I learned really early on that in order to be safe and loved in my house, I needed to people please and self-abandon, because anytime I trusted my instinct and asked a question from that space, it was shut down.
Hmm.
Because I would question things like, "Why are you taking those pills,
Yeah.
mommy?"
Yes.
And you don't ask that. So that's really dangerous for a child, right? It's not dangerous like being physically abused. It's dangerous in a different way.
Yes.
And it's really important to talk through that. I think for a while, there was this sense that, well, I had a rough childhood, but, and I think a lot of us feel this way, like, who am I to
Yeah.
complain, right? I wasn't molested by an uncle, and I wasn't whipped by my dad. And trauma is trauma. Little traumas that accumulate matter. Big traumas, whether they are emotional or physical, matter. They matter, especially in our formative years, because it's what shapes our reality. So for me, if we fast forward to college, I was so good at performing and perfecting and pleasing. You know, I knew exactly how to get a straight A, and I loved the academic world because it was so highly controlled. And since everything was so out of control in my household, I wanted whatever was going to make me feel back in control. And that's what my mother was really pushing me to do. So I always wanted to sing and dance. I always wanted to be an artist. And my mom sort of poo-pooed that because she always had so much financial instability that she thought your degree is a surefire way to a stable life. And then this thing happened at my university in an effort to be loved by every professor. And this one guy just not giving me anything other than a C. I plagiarized. I got an 18-month suspension. My mother was devastated. And I decided to shove that shame so far down and tell myself and everyone around me a story that I was taking a year off from school so I could pursue arts. And so now I'm this young 20-year-old living in Manhattan who's bartending to make a living because what else am I going to do? Trying to be a star. And that was it. You know, that was the moment in my life where my drug and alcohol addiction went from this thing that I did once in a while in between studying and getting straight A's into a full-blown problem. Did I see it as a problem? Absolutely not. Even after I overdosed on cocaine, did I see it as a problem? Kind of, but when you are engaged in a bad behavior, but you have all this stuff going on in the periphery that is proof that it's not that bad of a behavior, because if it was really that bad, would you still have a job? Would you still have a boyfriend? Would you still be pretty and popular? And by the way, back in school at that point, you know, so this idea of hitting rock bottom is so much deeper than almost losing your life, which may sound really counterintuitive to somebody listening. But, you know, the science of real change is that we need to exhaust our circuitries. And in my case, the circuitry was please, perfect, perform, lather, rinse, repeat, right? And then because I'm so exhausted from doing that all the time, I'm going to play. And my definition of play was get fucked up so I could quiet the unrelenting critical voice in my head. And why would I stop doing that? Even if something scary happened, I survived. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. When we have exhausted the patterns so much that the idea of continuing to live inside of them is more frightening than trying something new, that's when the change can take place. Doesn't mean it will, by the way. But I wasn't done. The idea of not living inside of those patterns of pleasing and performing and perfecting was unimaginable to me.
Yes.
Living any other way without drugs and alcohol, even as a side gig to relieve the pressure that always built up inside of me from having to be perfect, it was unimaginable to me to live without it. That was scarier than what had happened to me. And that's the thing with any change. Why does it take somebody who's overweight to reach whatever that weight is? Why was it that moment they could no longer imagine going on the way they were going on? That was more frightening to them than starting a program to take better care of themselves. Period. That's behavioral change. And the scariest thing about addiction is that a lot of addicts die before they get to the bottom. And I really think I didn't die because the man who ultimately I called, who saved my life, who was a friend of mine with 22 years sober from heroin addiction, he sponsored me. He took me through the steps. I fucking hated the steps. It's really important I let people know that because my book is literally a revision of the 12 steps for that reason. But he took me through them the best that he could, knowing they sounded so religious and suffocating. And at the end of my first year, he relapsed and killed himself.
Ugh.
That, besides being absolutely gut-wrenching and completely shocking to me, this was the only guy
Yes.
that I believed that sobriety worked for. He was the reason I was still going to meetings and working the steps and trying. I was miserable in my first year. When you're an addict and you're anesthetizing for a reason. When you take that away in early recovery, you're left with the voices inside your head that you can no longer quiet. And unless you douse yourself with spiritual solutions right away, as often as possible, even then it's difficult. It's excruciating though, when you don't. And I didn't. So now he's dead. This one thing I can trust and believe is dead. I absolutely in that moment could have just said, fuck it.
Yeah.
I could have said, I'm done. I'm out. It didn't work for him. There's no way it's going to work for me. For whatever reason, at the end of that year, I, at this point, was in graduate school, getting my doctorate. The guy that I was dating and who I had cheated on a zillion times in my active addiction stayed with me, and we were engaged. And I had enough to live for. So I hung on. I knew if I touched drugs and alcohol, I was going to die. And I didn't want to die, but I did not know how to live any other way than pleasing, performing, and perfecting. So I did that for the next 5 years until finally it didn't work. Because that man that I cheated on, that I got engaged to, that I got married to, pulled away and pulled away and pulled away in our early marriage. And I went insane trying to make him love me again. I couldn't imagine living in my own skin without his love for me. He was the only semblance of anything left that made my life seem worthwhile for the piece of shit that I was when I was using. That's how little spiritual work I had done on myself. That's how many decades of self-abandonment, of building no sense of resilience or worthiness or love for myself from the time that my mother said, don't you ever ask me that again. When this man was pulling away, there was nothing on the inside of me that could tell me I was going to be all right. It had to come from outside of me. And now it wasn't. So again, I could have relapsed. That was an option. For some reason, I didn't. I was scared of what happened to Bobby. I know that fear was a part of that equation, but I was so scared about what was going to happen to me. And that was rock bottom. I mean, that was the moment when, if you want to talk about circuitry,
Yes.
every ounce of pleasing and performing and perfecting stopped working. It stopped working. And I was so insane in sobriety, which, by the way, sobriety can be, and it is now, I'm 15 years sober, really, really fun and joyful. Really, really fun and joyful. I need to say that. And I fucking hated people who said that when I first got sober, because I was so angry. But man, I wasn't having any fun, and I had no access to joy. So this woman walked into my life and said, what if we do the steps on your marriage? And all of a sudden, everything religious sort of melted away, and it became very practical. And it was the thing that I couldn't stop obsessing over, and the thing I really needed help with, because I wasn't obsessing over finding the cocaine dealer. Though, if I didn't treat the spiritual side of things, would that have been a possibility? Absolutely.
Yes.
When we did that work, everything changed. That is the cornerstone of my book, because when I started to write and I thought about why I was writing, which was to help as many people as possible, I had to ask myself the question, well, what helped you? And spiritually speaking, that marital crisis, doing those steps in that way, was the moment I started to heal. And as a result of healing, the moment I started to start living again. Because I was just existing. I was just barely, and I would actually say I was surviving, because those patterns I was stuck in were survival skills. And that's the thing about the nervous system and patterns we're stuck in that aren't serving us, whether it's addiction to substance or to Instagram or to sex or to shopping or to food, you name it, whatever it is, we are obsessed with feeling better quickly. And you have to want to uncover what's underneath the pattern, but you can't do that when you're subconsciously stuck in it, right? I mean, I was, I think, really unconscious for decades in these patterns. Sobriety made me conscious, but not ready. My marital crisis made me conscious and ready.
Very interesting.
There's so much, right? As you know, because you read the book, like that is a huge chunk of my story, but it is not the whole story.
And the story continues. Like, I know you're helping so many people on a global basis, but there were so many bits of the book that I think apply to entrepreneurship and business and life, because we carry that stuff through, whether we like it or not, into our business, into our life, like into management roles, into the working world. And I know you've got your coaching course that is very special. We're going to talk about it towards the end. But so if you are enjoying this episode, if you have gotten value from this episode and it has changed your life by teaching you things, I'm going to ask you a huge favor. If you would subscribe, like, follow, and share with people so we can bring more incredible guests to the $1 Million Branders podcast to serve you better, so you can make more money in your business, in your life, and accelerate your growth into becoming the $1 million brand that I know is possible for you. Thank you, and my greatest appreciation to you. The one thing that you spoke about in your book was a lot of us are walking around just spiritually bankrupt. And I know, because I'm a recovering perfectionist, A-type personality. How do you cope through this? And what made you break that cycle of going, you know what, like, I'm not going to be a perfectionist anymore? Because that's a big circuit to break, especially for A-type personality. So with you, and I know you said step 1 is the most important step. So maybe you can walk us through some steps for recovering perfectionists who want to break the circuit, listening to this, because there's so many walking around.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, once I was aware that my desire to perfect was a survival skill that I needed when I was young, but that was hurting me as a girl, right? Because it wasn't actually giving me what I wanted. So when I was trying to perfect and fix and change and manipulate and manage my marriage, it wasn't working. So the thing about perfectionism, and what's really tricky about it, is that in the work world, culturally, we get highly rewarded for working to the bone until something's perfect.
So we drop.
But spiritually,
yeah,
it kills us in the process, right? So step 1 is this idea of powerlessness. And the real perspective shift on step 1 is not about that. There's a lot of talk now, about the downside of talking about negative things, and that it's replaying the trauma in our body. Okay, so I'm going to speak to that about this step. Step 1 in recovery: I am powerless over alcohol and my life has become unmanageable. Great. What if you're not an alcoholic? What if you're a perfectionist? I am powerless over, I don't know, let's think of 3 things that come to mind about your work life. What my coworkers think of me, what will be put on my desk when I already feel overwhelmed when I go into work tomorrow, and the future of my job,
Mm.
even though I really think I can control that. Okay, great. So now we've said some things we're powerless over. When I try to exert power over any of those 3 things, my life becomes unmanageable in the following ways. Well, I am ruminating and obsessing and constantly stressing about when the shoe's going to drop. I am less able to sleep and relax at the end of the day because I'm worried about the pile of the work on my desk. I am already planning out what I might say to the person who I think is thinking something about me at work that I can't control, but I'm queuing up instead of freeing up the mental energy and space to be creative and imaginative. Okay, right? Great. So we focused on all this negative shit. Here's the real flex, though, of the work. The real flex is how we spin it. What do I have the power to change in these scenarios? What do I have the power to change? What can I realistically control? And so you start to tweeze that out. You put your focus on the things you can control. And then you go out and do your bidding, right? You go out and you take actionable steps in the direction of what you can change. The hardest part for a perfectionist is to then let go, right? That's why step 1, that step is not enough, because you can do all that stuff and then have no idea how to surrender with any kind of peace and just swirl around in a sea of anxiety in the not knowing, in between getting the phone call, getting the answer to the problem, right? The thing about perfectionism is that it collapses with matters of the heart. I can tell you firsthand. Did perfectionism help that my sponsor committed suicide? Did it help me get through that?
No, absolutely not.
No. Did it help me when I found out my husband was having a 5-year extramarital affair to be more perfect? No. Did it help me when I lost my sister to a drug overdose 2 years ago?
Wow.
Right? And that's the thing. So even if it's working for you in your working life, it's going to fall flat on its face with matters of the heart, like resentment, fear, betrayal, and loss. So what are you going to do when you have a dark night of the soul? We do not get to go through this life without losing people we love, period. Even if it happens in the most beautiful, poetic way. You had the best relationship with your mom. She makes it to her 90s. She dies in her sleep, right? A dream. You're telling me you're not going to grieve? What level of perfectionism is going to help you get through that heartbreak? None.
0.
None. So the steps, and not just step 1, all of them are a pathway through our pain. The pain could be a small thing nagging you at work, could be a bigger thing like, I don't really know if I want to do this job anymore. I kind of want to change careers. That's gnawing at you. It could be miscarriaging and grieving that. It could be dating after divorce. It could be your dog dying. It doesn't matter what it is. I don't know about you. I was not given, especially in my house, a spiritual blueprint for how to get through life.
I don't know if any of us were.
When I say how to get through life, I don't mean get through it happily. I mean, get through the hardest times without jumping over your grief and numbing out and slowly or quickly killing yourself, but actually feeling it all and being able to come out on the other side
Absolutely.
with clarity and compassion and curiosity and the desire to live a more purposeful life. That's why we're here. That's why we're here.
It's
This
so
work means
inspirational.
everything to me.
Yes. No, absolutely. And I know you mentioned in your book, and I resonate with this completely, because my willpower, I've always thought, is second to none with anything, with exercise, with gym, with work, whatever it is. It's just, I feel like I really resonated with this book. Your words really were jumping off the page to me. But you spoke about willpower alone cannot clear a broken heart or a distressed mind. And I know we're speaking about this now, and often life and business often demand a certain strength beyond what we think we're capable of. So, Samantha, what do you believe is the key to accessing that deeper reservoir of strength when both personal and professional worlds feel like they're unraveling? Because I know you've been through this yourself.
This is probably something people have heard before, but I'm going to try to say it in a way where those people who couldn't hear it the way they needed to might be able to hear it now.
Wow.
When I got to the 9th step with that woman who said we should do the steps on your marriage, the 9th step in recovery is making an amends. Historically, you are taught to make an amends to others, right? You come in, you're an active addict, you created quite a bit of wreckage along the way, lying and cheating and stealing and God knows what. So once you get to step 9, you've done a lot of work on yourself and you're kind of ready to show up to these people, places, and things that you've hurt and say, I am so sorry. You know, you don't expect anything in return. And you don't just say, I'm sorry, you amend the behavior. That's the real work, to actually change the behavior going forward so you don't repeat it. Well, 5 years into recovery, for the first time in my life, this woman said, have you ever made an amends to yourself?
Wow.
If you are listening and you are a perfectionist, you've probably never made an amends to yourself. You are probably terrified of telling yourself, it's okay. You did great. In fact, you didn't just do enough, you did more than enough. Even if you don't get the job or the boyfriend or the house, you did a good job. Nobody ever spoke to me like that. And I certainly didn't speak to myself like that. Now, why does practice of more compassionate self-talk? Great. What happens when we do that? And by the way, you can't not get a little still. If you just begin a practice like that and you keep running towards producing, performing, pleasing, perfecting, you're not going to hear this part that I'm going to tell you. I had a lot of time in that healing process with that woman, in between trying to survive and make a living, because I didn't have my husband's financial support at that time either, to be still. Remember, I was also sober, so I wasn't drinking at the end of a long day. I was able to be still, which, by the way, sucked because I was in so much pain. But what happened was I could hear the whisper of my intuition, not the shout of my inner critic and the whole world and what everyone thought of my marriage and what he was doing and what I should do with my life and what I should do at my job to make more money and all the noise. We have so much noise. There is input coming at us at 1,000 miles an hour. You have to slow down. I could hear the whisper of a new voice. It sounded honestly unfamiliar, but I was so curious about it because it was so quiet and so calm and so compassionate that I thought, who is this? Where has she been? You're asking me how I got through it all, how I am now, from that moment till this moment, directed in my life, whether it is business or personal. I am always directed by the voice of my intuition when I get still enough to live. When I listen, I know it's her, not just because it sounds different, but also because it feels different in my body.
Yes.
If you're a perfectionist, you are tightly wound. Your nervous system is not comfortable in a state of rest and digest, in parasympathetic, in take it easy. You're running on a nervous system that is fight or flight, revved up, anxious, ready to go, just in case, right? You have to get still to get your nervous system into the opposite state so that the noise of that anxiety of the critic can calm down and you can hear some sort of divine guidance, some sort of otherness. So you could feel in your body the expansiveness of your intuitive voice, because all the rest of it is very constrictive. If you ever tune in when you're revved up in your perfectionism to your body, your body is constricted and tight. It's icky. Your intuitive voice feels absolutely opposite to that. I know how to get there. I know what she sounds like. I know what she feels like.
Amazing.
And then I take an actionable step in the direction she is nudging me. And then I put my hands up and I see what happens. These are things that are radical for the way I used to live. This is now the way I live, but I have had to retrain my nervous system. That's what my book is about.
It's incredible. And I think if people haven't read the book, they need to. There's just so many life lessons in there for, as I said, life and business. And you're going to be an amazing entrepreneurial coach. I'm so excited to speak about your course, because I just think we go through all these emotions and we do need to slow down. We're living in this attention economy, attention age, and there is so much noise around there. So getting in touch with that intuitive voice, I love that, because from a high achiever perspective too, and I know there are lots of them listening, that is the most important advice, because we're hard on ourselves. That voice is super hard on ourselves, especially, you know, when it comes to perfectionism. So there's a lot of people also stuck in generational trauma or addiction. And this is something that I really want to touch on, because certain people can't help where they're born or, you know, outside environmental circumstances. But I believe that we can break the circuit and change that generational curse, right, in our head. And then it affects the next generation and the next generation. Like, I know you went through things with your mom, your dad, your sister. So what advice would you give to those entrepreneurs or just people listening to this that need a little bit of push to know, to find that hopeful voice as you speak about it, and change their legacy so the next generation is okay and they're the ones to break that generational curse?
So something really practical that I like to turn people's attention toward is scanning their life. So just forget about going back in time. A lot of us know we have trauma. Some of us don't think it's that big of a deal or that it's not affecting us. Some of us don't think we had it all, but we have. Let's just put that all away. And we just go, okay, at the end of this episode, when we all stop listening to this episode, I'm going to take 2 minutes. I'll put a timer on my phone and I'm just going to shut my eyes and I'm going to think about my relationships currently in my life. I'm going to think about my friendships. I'm going to think about romantic relationships, whether I have one or not. And if I don't, where I'm at with how I'm thinking about it. I'm going to scan the quality of my relationship to food, to alcohol, to sleep.
Wow.
And I'm also going to scan my relationship to my self-talk. Just like a quick old inventory. How's it going? Most people are going to find one or more spots that are off, that aren't kind of what they wish it would be, right?
Yeah.
And that is a starting point, because now we have some awareness. All right, let's say it's romance. You really want to find somebody, but you've had no luck and you're just ugh, like the idea of even pursuing it is so annoying and gross and brings up all the past stuff and right? So you know you want it, but you don't really want to do anything about it. So now what? And then are you just going to perpetuate just kind of being like angry? Because that's what every other person was, you know, who got their heart broken before you, your mom or your dad or your ancestors, right? And you're just be alone and miserable forever. Well, you can be, that is absolutely an option, but it's gnawing at you. It's bothering the quality of your life, right? So we have to dial into the pieces that don't feel good and we have to love on them. If we act like we're okay when we're not, we will get to the end of our lives having repeated these patterns that our ancestors repeated. So again, you've got to be in that point of desperation, willingness, exhaustion, whatever you want to call it, of ignoring the thing that you know isn't great in your life. You have to be like, I'm done ignoring this thing. I'm done ignoring this thing. I have no idea what to do next, but I'm done ignoring it. Then you have to get still. You have to love yourself through the stillness and you have to wait and see what comes up. Something's going to come up that's going to give you a suggestion to try something different. Just the act of trying something different is changing the trajectory of the generational trauma. You have to stay open and willing and curious to try something new. Unless you don't care and you just want to perpetuate the pattern. But if you want to do better, if you want to leave a new footprint behind you, you have to do new things.
So strong and such incredible advice, seriously. Like, and I feel, you know, a lot of authors don't sound like they do in their book, but when you speak, you do. You just speak so beautifully and you write so beautifully. So it's amazing having read it and then having this conversation with you. Normally, I would ask people for the last question, what is $1 million brand? However, I'm going to ask a little bit of a different question to you because I feel like people do need to break some circuits in business to get to the next level. So when it comes to building $1 million brand, Samantha, what circuits do you think a brand or a personal brand or a company needs to break in order to get to that next level?
That's a really good question. But I, you know, intuitively have the answer to that, which is that if you are trying to be $1 million brand, then by whatever means necessary, whether it is my 12-step template or somebody else's, become a spiritual billionaire first.
Oh, so good. So good. That is so good.
That's the truth.
Yes, because there's a lot of people walking around spiritually bankrupt. And you can't fight with your own spiritual billionaire inside. So I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. And lastly, how can we find you? I know you're working on something extremely unique that is going to be amazing and show-stopping. And I can't wait to see what you do next. But it's called the Strong Heart Method. Can you walk us through that? And guys, also, I'm going to say, if you haven't bought this book, you need to do it. I'm going to personally buy another 2 copies. If you can sign them the beautiful way to 2 humans that really need your book, because I feel we all should have a copy sitting on our desk. That would be amazing. But tell us about the Strong Heart Method.
In my marital crisis, I sort of accidentally started my private practice called Strong Heart Fitness and Physical Therapy. And really, I was surviving truly and trying to figure out how to make money and also help people. And I came up with this systematic approach to rewiring the nervous system when people would come to see me for body pain. That was really progressive and unique to the individual and backed by science and very different from a traditional physical therapy approach. On the other side of writing this book, with 15 years of sobriety, having navigated just so much loss, this 12-step template that used to be assigned for addicts and substance abusers is now available to anybody. So when somebody comes to work with me, I no longer just work with their body. I work with all of them.
Amazing.
So my coaching program is a true mind, body, spirit integration. It is over the course of 12 weeks, could be longer. And it encompasses everything I know as a doctor of physical therapy and everything I know about rewiring the nervous system energetically, physically, spiritually. And we use the 12 steps from recovery as a template, but we make them absolutely customizable to what the person is navigating, like perfectionism.
Mhm.
They come out on the other side, not just a different person with so many new perspectives on how to see their life and the world around them, but with tools that they can use forever. I mean, this is stuff that gets woven into the fabric of how you bend down to the floor to pick something up so you don't throw your back out, all the way to something just happened at work. Your normal response would be to perfect or overperform or shut down or react. And now your default response is to wait 24 hours, draft a message, maybe you never hit send, get still, get quiet, and then maybe the next day right back intuitively in a really neutral way. I mean, I'm talking about a fucking reboot everywhere
Love it.
for the rest. So you get this thing, but it's not a fad. This is not a thing that goes away and isn't useful next year.
Yeah.
Like the clothes we
The
buy
lifestyle.
at the store. This is woven into the fabric of who you are and how you live forever.
So important. And I think we all need this. Doesn't matter who you are, what country you live in, what demographic. So just congratulations on, firstly, your book, your huge success of the Strong Heart Method. I can't wait to see what they do next. I think you need a movie. So I'm just putting that out to the universe because I feel like
I
that would be
already
great.
wrote a screenplay and I'm
There you
working on a
go.
docuseries right now.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go. I think that would be amazing. And how do people find you? I know you've got a huge social media presence. Your content is incredible. You speak about life. You speak about the real things I feel people don't normally talk about, which I love. And I'll put the handles below, but please tell us, how do people reach you and find you?
Yeah, right now everything is streamlined at Dr. Samantha Harte. So Dr. Samantha Harte, and that's my website, YouTube,
Perfect.
TikTok, Instagram. I'm big on Instagram though. If you want to catch the best content, it would be
Yes,
there.
you are. And I can't wait to see what circuits you break next. Thank you so much. I'm going to call you Dr. Samantha because it just sounds so good. And I feel like you look amazing today. So we need to honor the doctor bit. But we will definitely be in touch soon. And thank you so much for your time and your presence on the $1 Million Branders podcast.
Thank you so much.
Hey, here we come. Here we come.